Kaufman is a small town in southeast Texas, about 50 miles from Dallas, with a population of just under 8,000. But in 2013, this quiet town became the backdrop for an astonishing story, one of insane revenge in the name of justice. The story begins with a man named Mark Hussey. Mark worked as a prosecutor for most of his life. He spent much of his career in Dallas, where he handled numerous cases involving organized crime. When he turned 50, he decided to leave the bustling city and move to the small town of Kaufman. In Kaufman, he continued his work as an assistant to the chief prosecutor, Michael McClelland. But instead of dealing with high-profile murder and drug cases, he now handled quieter matters, mostly petty theft and minor offenses. Since serious crime was virtually non-existent in this small, peaceful town, his colleagues appreciated his professionalism and spoke highly of him as a person. In his new surroundings, Mark quickly built good relationships with his boss and co-workers, bought a nice house, and, leaving the noise of Dallas behind, settled into a quieter, more relaxed life. However, this peaceful existence came to an end on January 31st, 2013.
Kaufman County 911. Yes, sir. We've got a gentleman on Grove Street and Madison that just got shot. Help me! Oh my God, it's Mark Hussey, the assistant district attorney.
Around 9 a.m., 5 shots were fired in front of the prosecutor's office, followed by 3 more shots seconds later. Police arrived at the scene and found Mark Hussey bleeding out. The killer had left no trace, no fingerprints, no weapon, and not even any bullet casings were found. It appeared to be a meticulously planned murder carried out by a professional hitman. Despite the careful execution, there were witnesses. One witness reported that the man who shot Mark was dressed entirely in black. Immediately after firing the shots, the killer jumped into the back seat of a white sedan and vanished from sight. Another witness didn't see the shooter, but overheard the conversation between the killer and Mark, during which Hussey shouted, "No, no, I'm sorry." Naturally, such a blatant crime prompted a serious response from the authorities. Mark Hussey's boss, Mike McClelland, was blunt when speaking to the local media. "I know you're watching this. We're going to find you soon. No matter where you're hiding, we're going to drag you out. The only thing that upsets me right now is that you're not in my custody, but that's about to change." Soon, other agencies, including the FBI, arrived in Kaufman to investigate, and the murder of Mark Hussey became a top priority. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why a prosecutor might have been targeted. The primary motive for Mark's murder was almost certainly linked to his professional work. The police began reviewing all the cases Mark Hussey had handled during his last 3 years as a prosecutor in Kaufman. However, none of these cases involved violent crimes. They were all fairly routine, such as vandalism or petty theft, crimes that typically wouldn't justify such extreme measures. 4 weeks later, an anonymous user posted a message on the police website claiming to have overheard 2 people in a bar arguing loudly about Mark Hussey's murder. These individuals seemed unusually well informed about the case, which piqued the anonymous user's interest. However, the message provided no contact information, making it impossible to determine details like the type of bar, the appearance of the individuals, or the specifics of their conversation. As a result, this lead did not contribute any meaningful information to the investigation into Mark Hussey's murder. The theory that the murder was connected to Mark Hussey's professional activities remained the leading one. The method of the killing suggested that a criminal organization might have sought revenge related to one of the court cases. Specifically, several members of the group known as the Nazi Brotherhood had been convicted 3 months prior to Mark's murder. Although the Kaufman prosecution was involved in the case, it had not played a prominent role in the proceedings. 7 weeks after Mark Hussey's murder, Tim Clemens, the chief of the Colorado City Jail, was shot and killed outside his home. The shooter was a member of the Nazi Brotherhood gang. This new murder intensified fears among everyone involved in the case against the gang, as it seemed that anyone connected could be the next target. The link between the 2 murders became glaringly obvious when police tracked down Clemens' killer in Texas. Unfortunately for the authorities, the suspect was killed in a collision with a truck during the chase, making it impossible to question him. Without the ability to interrogate the suspect, connecting the 2 cases became exceedingly difficult. The investigation continued, but with each passing day, the likelihood of solving the case seemed to diminish. Then, another murder happened. On March 30th, a large family dinner was scheduled to take place at the home of Mike McClelland, Mark Hussey's boss. However, on that morning, neither Mike nor his wife Cynthia answered calls or text messages. Concerned, the family decided to check on them and see how the dinner preparations were coming along. Unfortunately, the dinner never happened. When they arrived at the McClelland home, it was immediately apparent that something horrific had occurred. There were shell casings scattered in the doorway, the front door was ajar, and Mike and Cynthia McClelland were found on the living room floor, covered in blood. Both had been shot in the same manner as Mark Hussey. It was clear that these murders were connected. Someone was so enraged with members of the American justice system that this time, instead of targeting the victim in a secluded location, the perpetrator went straight to their home, knowing full well that this would also endanger an innocent member of the victim's family. The investigation now ramped up with renewed intensity. The police worked around the clock, 24/7, on these cases. The question on everyone's mind was, who would be next? To everyone's surprise, it was revealed that Mike McClelland had voluntarily opened the door to the killer, as there were no signs of forced entry into the house. The killer entered the home at 7 in the morning, fired 20 shots in just 2 minutes, and then fled the scene in a white sedan, the same vehicle reported by witnesses after the murder of Mark Hussey. 24 hours later, a new anonymous tip was posted on the police website. The police began to examine cases involving both Hussey and McClelland more closely, not just focusing on violent crimes, but also on less serious offenses. One such case was that of Eric Williams, which involved both of the murdered men, Mark Hussey and Mike McClelland. Eric Williams was working as an attorney in the Kaufman Township Judicial Department until he was caught stealing 3 computer monitors. There was no money or weapons involved, just the monitors. The crime was captured on surveillance cameras, leading to Eric's arrest. Mark Hussey and Mike McClelland served as prosecutors in the case against Williams. Although Eric was convicted, he avoided jail time, receiving only a suspended sentence. However, he lost his law license, was fired from his job, and would never be able to practice law again due to the loss of his license. Hussey, McClelland, and Williams had crossed paths in court before. Hussey and McClelland as prosecutors, and Williams as an attorney. They often faced each other on opposite sides of the legal battles. Some believe that during Williams' trial, Hussey and McClelland were excessively harsh, portraying him as a significant threat, despite his crime being limited to attempting to steal 3 old monitors. The case likely became personal for Hussey and McClelland, and it clearly became personal for Williams as well. With no other suspects, the police turned their attention to Eric Williams. They examined his computer and discovered, through his search history, that he had been actively researching Mark Hussey and Mike McClelland over the past several months. At Williams' home, investigators found documents related to a white sedan registered under a false name, as well as a piece of paper with the username and password for an account used to post anonymous messages on the police website. Up until that point, Eric Williams had only been arrested for making threats online. There was insufficient evidence to charge him with the murders. However, the next day, an acquaintance of Eric provided the police with crucial information that helped crack the case. An acquaintance of Eric Williams reported that, a few months earlier, Eric had asked him to rent a garage under his name. Inside that garage, investigators found the same car that had been seen on the days of the Hussey and McClelland murders. But that was just the beginning. The garage also contained police uniforms, badges, a large arsenal of weapons, and even homemade napalm, all of which Eric had stored there. Surveillance cameras installed outside the garage captured a vehicle leaving the premises right when Mike McClelland was killed. However, forensic analysis of the firearms discovered in the garage did not match those used in the murders of Hussey and McClelland. Despite this, there was ample evidence to convict Eric Williams of the murders of Mark Hussey, Mike McClelland, and Cynthia McClelland. In December 2013, the trial of Eric Williams began. The first hearing addressed the murders of Cynthia and Mike McClelland. The defense argued that the murder weapon had never been found, and that there were no witnesses placing Eric at the crime scene on the day of the murders. Despite these arguments, the jury was not convinced. Eric Williams was found guilty of the murders of Mike and Cynthia McClelland. It's important to note that after Mark Hussey's murder, Mike McClelland became suspicious of Eric Williams. McClelland reported his suspicions to the police, who visited Eric for the first time, but found no grounds to consider him a suspect. The police failed to notice that Eric's hands were covered with bruises, which could have resulted from a struggle with Hussey. Additionally, It remains unclear why McClelland opened his door to Williams if he was a suspect in Hussey's murder. The answer is straightforward. Williams was dressed in a police uniform, and McClelland did not recognize him. Believing Williams to be a legitimate officer, McClelland led him into his home without suspicion. The trial for the murder of Mark Hussey followed. It's worth noting that witnesses had seen Hussey's killer jump into the back seat of a car and flee the scene. While the police had both the car and Eric Williams in custody, they still needed to determine who was driving that morning. It turned out that the driver was Eric's wife, Kim. Kim was arrested after Eric, and she confessed not only to being aware of the murders, but also to having helped Eric commit them. Her testimony was crucial in locating the weapon used in the murders. Eric had wrapped the gun in a black bag and discarded it under one of the city's bridges. Additionally, Kim revealed that Eric's next target was a judge connected to his previous case. According to her, Eric planned to kill the judge with a crossbow. Kim's testimony addressed the remaining questions and led to Eric receiving the ultimate penalty, the death sentence. Kim Williams, in turn, was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Judging by the number of guns found in Eric Williams' garage, it seemed he was planning to wage a full-scale war against the Kaufman justice system to quench his thirst for revenge. But were 3 old monitors truly worth the lives of so many people, including his own? The answer to that question is clear to everyone except Eric Williams.